Okay, so in this video I'm going to show how to install the heads on the Innovative gauge with Innovative bracket, which has this fork that sticks out to the bottom that will then go inside the head on both sides right here. This is roughly what it will look like when we're done installing. Now these heads, this one is OEM head that has not been modified, and this one I have already modified. So first thing you'll notice that I had to cut off this mounting point. Otherwise it sits right in the middle of all these wires and you simply are not able to push this head down to where it needs to be. So I cut this off, but I made sure to leave a little bit of space so that I can drill a hole there in the middle, because this is where my zip ties will go. And I grounded off any tab that sticks out on the inside of the head. Okay, so there will be one over here, one over there. There are some over here on the edges. Okay, all these tabs. And I also grounded off an opening right here and right here, so that the end of this gauge right here can sit comfortably without pushing up against this lower head. If you look at the OEM lower head, it has this large hump over here. So all this has to be grounded off on both sides. Okay, when you do this, you will see that you're gonna end up with a hole over here, which is fine. There's plenty of material left to keep this in one piece. So you'll have holes on both sides when you grind all this off. And I went ahead and grounded off just a little bit here on the bottom as well, just to be on the safe side, to make sure the head has plenty of space for the gauge. Okay, so there's another tab over here that I took off. Now, in order to install the head onto the gauge, I will need zip ties. I highly suggest using these small, thin ones, because there's very little space here, and this just makes things much easier. So I'm gonna start off. Okay, so the bracket here has two holes here at the bottom. So I'm gonna thread my zip tie through one of these holes, another one on the other side. Okay, I'm gonna take another zip tie and install it here about a ½ inch down. And another one, again about ½ inch down. All right, now your head will go like this, and I'm gonna thread these two zip ties right through the hole here. Now I do need to cut this off first. When you thread these, and you feel like there's too much zip ties you can always go back and tighten it right here. I'll give it another roughly 1/2 inch. And cut off the ends. Okay, I've got them threaded. You want one zip tie on one side and the other one on the other side, and then go ahead and connect them to the bottom. Okay, just a little bit so it's tight, so it's connected but not tight at the same time. Okay, so at this point it's all loose. But I've got my zip ties going and they're connected on each side. Now at this point, I want to make sure that my forks here go on the side of this connecting point here. So I'm going to push the head forward and push it down. Okay, and I usually use these bolts right here to make sure that the head is evenly spaced between each bolt. If I look at the sides, I can see over here it's flush. On this side, if it's not flush, I'll push it forward and push it down at the same time. Once my head is pretty much almost there, you can see from the front, looks right. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten this. Now you don't want to tighten it too much because you don't want to break anything. Granted, it's pretty solid and you shouldn't have any issues. So I'm gonna go ahead and tighten all this down. Okay. And we're almost done here. At this point, the head is sitting firmly on the gauge. If there's any squishy feeling here, it's probably because you didn't grind down enough material from your head over here, especially the edges right here. If this edge here makes contact with the gauge, you will hear that plastic is rubbing against the gauge and it will be squishy and it'll make squeaky sounds. So you know you need to grind off a little bit more material. So if it feels firm, then you know you did it right. And here you should be flush. Here you should be flush. Your head should be flush. Here up against the gauge. At this point, you can tighten this down some more if you need to, just so that it is tight. And okay, just hand tighten it as much as you can. Definitely don't use any tools. Nothing should break, but you want to be on the safe side. Cut off your ends. And at this point, the gauge is ready to be installed. Now, because we completely installed the head on top of the bracket and the gauge is already installed, you will not be able to use the screws in order to screw in the bracket as you would do in my usual setup. In your usual setup, you can install, you have an option of installing the gauge bracket first, then drive your screw in while this is in the dash, and then install your gauge and then your head, because your head clips in throw this clip. Since none of this is available here, you would simply have to push this in and just let it sit like this.